Hey everyone, this is Joe, the Panicked Monk, and you are watching Lost in Time, a Dwemer's concept. I wanted to take this episode and talk a little bit about Szenac from a character concept point of view. Go over some of the technical stuff. I do have a couple levels under my belt, and we will go over those, and we'll pick our perks and our skills and all that good stuff. But first, I wanted to talk about the character a little bit. Now, first of all, notice that I said character concept. This is not a character build. I don't do character builds. And it might be splitting hairs a little bit, but there's a reason for that. I don't like character builds. I like concepts. I don't want you to have my character. I don't want to build your character. What I'd rather do is talk about the concept so that we can each have our own unique characters and enjoy the game from our own perspectives. Plus, it just seems a little cold. It seems impersonal. And I guess I would rather have a broader brush to paint with than have to worry about keeping within the lines. So I would rather deal with it as a concept rather than a character build. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the perks you need to take at this level and the perks you need to take at that level, and here's the equipment that you should have, and here's the skills you should focus on. That doesn't sound fun to me, to be quite honest. It just doesn't sound like a fun way to play. If I want to do that, I'll play Street Fighter or, something, linear like that, where you pick your champion and you fight, or what have you. But you know what I mean. Anyway, let's start. Let's go over Szenac a little bit, shall we? As you know, Szenac is a Dwemer, or as close to an approximation of a Dwemer as seen through my eyes. I did pick up a Dwemer mod, a race mod. There's a couple out there, and the one that I chose, it seemed like it had kind of the most even points about it, without... it's just the one that I gravitated towards, and it is in the show notes, or not the show... Well, I have a link to my mod list in the show notes. It's in there. I just think it's called Deep Elf or something on that order. So that's what I started out with as a base, and from there I altered his skin tone to be a little darker. Now, if I were to do it again, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably lighten it up, maybe even a bit of a golden hue, more like an Altmer. There are conflicting arguments on both, on skin tone. Well, of course there is, right? There's conflicting opinions and arguments on everything. But I've read things that liken the skin tone of the Dwemer to the Altmer, because they are related to the Aldmeri. The Altmer. There's a distinction there that I'm not perfectly versed on, but they are more closely related to them than they are, say, the Dunmer, which actually their skin tone would have changed well after the Dwemer's existence. So they actually were of a golden hue as well, so the Chimer. But then there's opinions that it was more of a gray or a dark gray, but there's really no evidence either way. So some of the gray tones is what I came across first without really diving too deep into it like I probably should have, so that's kind of the direction I went. So we're going to go with that for the sake of this story. But if if you're looking to create a Dwemer type of character, it's really up to you. It's how do you want to interpret it. I opted for a darker gray tone, but there's really no evidence either way. There's drawings in the game, there's statues, but you can hardly gain any kind of a notable skin tone from that. So anyway, moving on. Let's talk about psychological profile. I want to start with psychological profile, and then I'm going to get into the Circles of Conflict. This is a concept that we've talked about on the Character Crusade podcast, but I will get into that shortly. So let's start with the psychological profile. I have adopted the profile used by the old game, the old 1987 TSR game Top Secret SI, Special Intelligence, Secret Intelligence. You would have to look it up, but Top Secret SI, and that system used a psychological profile that consists of 6 different areas that represent distinct tendencies of a character's psyche. And those 6 items are cruelty, loyalty, passion, piety, sanity, and selfishness. Within each of those, you can rank them anywhere from none to total. So what I've done is I've kind of tried to backtrack a little bit and gave some scores to what I believe Szenac would have started with prior to his falling in Kagranzel. So when he went to Kagranzel, while he was still in his own time stream. And what I came up with was a cruelty of none, a loyalty of total, a passion of high, a piety of none, a sanity of high, and a low selfishness. So let's talk about that for just a second and why I chose those. I chose the cruelty of none because even though Szenac grew up as kind of the odd one out, he never carried any kind of malice towards anyone. It never occurred to him to hurt other people. He was more concerned with his own internal struggles rather than trying to jack people around next to him. So growing up and as a young adult, he's not a cruel man. He just never was. His loyalty is total because even though Szenac kept to himself, was introverted, and didn't have this large circle of friends, the people he did know and trust, he was loyal to through and through. So even though his loyalty wasn't easily given, once it was pretty much for life, and he would lay his life down for anyone that he cared for. That brings us to passion. Passion is high because Szenac always strove to be the very best that he could. He kind of had that chip on his shoulder, feeling that he grew up, I guess, a little bit behind everyone else because he was an orphan. So he tried just that little bit more to prove that that wasn't a factor, that he was every bit as good or better than the people around him. So he was very passionate in the things that he cared about. And piety. Well, I would not categorize any of the Dwemer as pious. Yes, Szenac, like his kin, recognized the gods, but they didn't worship them. Szenac didn't even really worship Numidium, even though he has been known to invoke the brass god's name. it's more out of, I guess, I don't know, like a punctuation than it is any kind of pious feelings towards the new medium. So I don't see Szenac as ever being a pious person. I don't see any of the Dwemer as being pious outside of acknowledging the existence. Sanity. Sanity I put as high. Szenac's very measured and analytical, and this kind of goes in with his, I guess kind of ties a little bit into the cruelty aspect, or it's symbiotic of it, in that, he's never is one to have made rash or illogical decisions. He was always very thoughtful of what he did and the things around him. So I would categorize his sanity as very high. He's not going to rush into something without a lot of thought. And I know these are all pretty broad categories, and within each of these things, you can have subcategories within subcategories. I mean, someone that you could consider clinically insane could be very analytical. But I'm using it in a broader sense in this term because, I'm just not going to get mired down in the minutia of line items, if you will, on each of these. So I kind of envision Szenac as being very, very even-keeled. Which brings us to selfishness. And I don't feel that Szenac was a very selfish person. He would give of himself freely, and especially to those he cared about, and would really expect nothing in return. So Szenac was not a selfish person. So that's kind of where my baseline is, I guess, when Szenac came into the game. Since then, Szenac has had quite a few trials and tribulations. So how has that affected his psychological profile in these terms? Well, for the most part, it hasn't, but a few things have changed. His cruelty has migrated from none to low. And that doesn't make Szenac sadistic by any means, but he has begun to develop a more callous attitude towards those that would do him harm. And I think this has come out most notably with his combat against the Falmer. So he's developing a bit of a cruel streak when it comes to certain actions against him. Loyalty. That has dropped to a high, from total to high. Szenac lost his only trusted companion, his Forge Master, Inadoc. And he still holds Inadoc in very high regards. But that's about it. He's kind of lost a little bit of faith in Inadoc's guidance, perhaps. After all, it was Inadoc who sent him to Cagrenzel, though in his heart, Szenac would know that he would probably have perished otherwise if he hadn't have gone to Cagrenzel. So Inadoc either knew something that Szenac didn't, or didn't realize what was going to happen to him, and thought either way was helping him. So Szenac knows that, but that bit of trust in his Forge Master has wavered slightly since he's arrived in this era. And he is definitely reserving trust of anyone else in this world at the moment, until someone can come along that deserves it. So he's kind of he's pulling all of that those feelings in, and he's holding them there until the right time, I guess. So Szenac's passion has always been high, but now he is very driven. His passion has bumped up to a total. He is completely devoted to finding out how he came to be in his current state, this current era that consumes his every thought. Finding out not necessarily what happened to his people, but what happened to him. Why is he here? His piety has really not changed. He's still not a pious person. And honestly, everything that has occurred has probably only strengthened his non-belief. His sanity, I would say, is probably still at a high. There may be some cracks developing in his psyche around his sanity, just because of the stress that he's been put under by his current state, as far as, he's in a completely different place, a different time, being alone and being thrown into survival mode, really. So he's very stressed, and there may be some hairline cracks developing that will drop his sanity a little bit, but right now I think he's holding true. Nonetheless, he is an engineer, and that is kind of stabilizing him for the moment. And last, selfishness. Szenac has increased his selfishness to some from low, and that is a direct result of having to survive. He's become more cautious, more distrustful towards the world as a whole, and has become much less willing to share himself or his things. So these aren't huge shifts, and they shouldn't be. I mean, large changes to a person's psyche happen over time. Yes, you can have traumatic events that will change you, your personality almost overnight. But for the most part, I think a lot of people experience these kind of changes naturally over their lifespan. And, this character is no different. This is why I like a character concept over a character build. It just seems to be more flexible. It allows you to flow with the game, to react with the game, and not necessarily feel like you are beholden to set criteria. And that's why I wanted to go over this exercise on Szenac's psychological profile from these 6 categories, and in the broad sense that they imply. Again, we're not going to get mired in the details. We're just going to kind of lay out the broad definition of all these things. So, kind of recap that. Szenac has become a touch more cruel. He's become a little less loyal. He has become a little more passionate. His piety has not changed. It's actually probably strengthened on his previous note. His sanity has not changed, although depending on the encounters that he will have in the future, that may change. It likely will. I mean, who's to say? He could go through some very traumatic experiences, but then he could come around and restabilize. So right now his sanity's holding at high, and then his selfishness has increased a little bit, primarily just on self-preservation. So that's kind of where Szenac is on the psychological profile. And I will leave a link in the notes if you are curious to kind of see some more examples of the psychological profile and how I've categorized them and given them weights and values. that brings us to the Circles of Conflict. The Circles of Conflict, if you're not aware, is a concept that we've discussed on the Character Crusade podcast many episodes ago. Actually, in Season 1, it was our 8th episode that we ever put out. So, if you are interested in reading up about the Circles of Conflict, you can go to charactercrusade.com, Creations, Ideas and Tools, and there will be a link to the post on the left side. If you want to listen to our discussion on it, you can go to podcast, scroll down to Season 1, and look for CC08, Circles of Conflict. And again, I'll leave these in the notes. So let's start out. The Circles of Conflict contain 3 primary areas: personal conflict, interpersonal conflict, and societal conflict. So let's start at the top. And these, if you imagine like a bullseye, these are like concentric rings that narrow towards the center, which is societal conflict. So let's start out with the personal. Personal conflict is all about the character's inner demons. What does our character struggle with that causes them pain or forces them down pathways that others don't go? What are the lies that they tell themselves? What are their justifications? In Szenac's current state, Szenac struggles with relationships, whether that be friendships or romantic ones. He struggles with relationships. That's probably been a constant for him. But in order to avoid this struggle, what he's done and what he continues to do is he immerses himself in his craft. This is part of the reason that he garnered Enodoc's eye, and that why he focuses so heavily on his smithing, and why when he's at the forge or at the table pounding and shaping metal, he's relaxed. He feels free, because what it does is it takes his mind away from all these things that he laments over. So what it allows him to easily convince himself that, well, I just don't have the time for friends. I don't have the time for romance. I've got my craft. It needs my attention. So that's Szenac's personal conflict. That's his inner demon, is really trying to come to terms with how to deal with others, really. He's very introverted in that way. The next ring in is the interpersonal conflict. And the interpersonal conflict is about complications of relationships. Much of our life is defined through our interactions and those closest to us. Conflict with family, friends, and rivals have a powerful effect on the direction of our lives and often clouds our abilities to make rational decisions. So, what is Szenac's interpersonal conflict? Well, as an orphan, he's only known the companionship of his forge master. It's the only one he trusts. It was Enodoc who took him in, gave him a chance, in Szenac's opinion, gave him a chance at life. And because of Szenac's introverted nature, without Enodoc's guidance, his kind of father figure, his advice, Szenac would have been really another statistics in the annals of tragedy. We also have Khalit. Khalit is the name we've given to Enodoc's, or not Enodoc, but Szenac's conjured wraith. The form that the wraith takes, we've named that form Khalit. And Khalit is really just a memory. It's not even any form that Szenac can really describe or tell you why. It's just kind of a wisp of a memory. And what Khalit is someone that cared for him when he was an infant. So it's kind of that residual caring that Szenac is grabbing onto and projecting as his wraith. And given the nature of the wraith as kind of a protector, it kind of makes sense. So, because Enodoc is gone, because the only protection he can conjure up is literally conjured up, he feels lost currently. He's lost and rather distrustful of others. So that's his interpersonal conflict. Is he doesn't trust other people, and it's going to take some time before that can happen. And it may never happen. That may be a burden that he carries throughout his entire life. We can hope not, but it's very possible. That brings us to societal conflict. What are the institutions of society that our character rails against or embraces? Well, Szenac has never cared for the manner in which the Falmer were treated by his kin. He never dared voice his opinion on the matter, except to anyone but Enodoc, who he trusted, but he never cared for that part of accepted Dwemer society. The Dwemer also had a fairly strict order of professions. They would groom their children in certain facets, so as to create this stronger society, which it did, but at the expense of personal choices. As an orphan, Szenac felt that grooming process, that selection process, to be biased and unfair to anyone that lacked, parental influence, which primarily would have been children in his situation in the orphanage. Now, this is not canon. This is not there. I cannot point you to a book that says that this is how the Dwemer society dealt with their children and their career paths. This is a creation of my own, so as to give Szenac a little bit of interest. So, because of his outlook on how the Falmer were treated, because of his view of the professional choices given in such particular manner, his outlook has created he has created an outlook that's he has a soft spot for the people in need, especially children, but at the same time he has a sense of distrust in any governing body. So, his empathy towards the Falmer has given him this soft spot for people that are in need, while his view of society dictating what you will or will not do gives him a real distrust of governing bodies. So that's kind of the three rings of character conflict that Szenac is operating in currently. And these will change, as we've talked about on the podcast many times. It's okay for a character to change. It's okay for them to grow. What you start out with should not look like the character you end the game with, that you decide to retire. Your character will have gone through a great many things that will have changed their outlook, will have changed their views on relationships, will change their own internal assessment of themselves, and you gotta just go with it. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of kind of where I have Szenac currently, and I'm gonna hopefully be able to use this, and this was a really good exercise for myself as well, to help me make decisions better in game. Up to this point, he's only 10th level. Again, we're going to level him up, but in the early stages, you're just, you're building those levels so that you can survive more or less. So, but kind of at this point, moving forward, we can use these inner circles of conflict. We can use the psychological profile as tools, as means to help us make in-game decisions. So I actually printed this out. Well, I don't have it printed, but I've got it typed out, and I probably will print it. And it's something that I can keep with me, that I can refer to as I'm playing the game, so that I don't get sucked into some of the pitfalls of the game. For example, all characters will end up as sneaky archers, right? So these kind of exercises help prevent you from falling into those comfortable pitfalls or areas that are just really easy for you to get into. Of course you want to play the game to have fun. First and foremost, it's a game, right? Enjoy it. Have fun. But if you want to kind of breathe some life into it and take it from a different angle, give this a try. Give it a try. Again, hopefully that helps explain Szenac's point of view. And I think with this in mind, we are going to level up. Before we do, let's take a quick look at our spell capabilities as they currently are. Now, as you've noticed, we are back in the College of Winterhold, back in our room. We've changed. We're comfy, warm, dry, and safe. All the things that we like. So, let's look at our illusion. We have Ghost Walk. Ghost Walk is something we use heavily, and I think this is going to have to be a must-be for dual casting so that we can increase the range we can travel with Ghost Walk, which has been a problem lately, especially in the larger, longer rooms where it just dissipates. It ends too soon. So I think Ghost Walk has got to be a must-have. Illusion, dual casting. Gotta do it. That way we can stretch our enemies out further away from our casting point. Destruction, probably not now, eventually, but not quite yet. Conjuration. We have a new spell. We were able to buy a spell from one of the teachers here at the college, and we chose Summoning Rune because it's, well, honestly, one of the few things we could afford at the time. So that is what Szenac chose to purchase, and I'm looking forward to trying that out. I think it's going to be pretty helpful. Restoration would be a good idea, but it's not going to be something Szenac focuses in. And then Child's personal effects and all that. So Szenac does have a penchant for illusion and conjuration. So those are kind of the two areas where he's going to feel the most comfortable in, and will probably look for spells first in either of these two schools. But he will branch out probably to destruction and as well as alteration, which, as you can see, he has none. So, without further ado, let's look at our perks. So, here we go. At one point, I believe, if I remember correctly, that I was going to alternate magic with health and stamina. So, a point in magicka, point in health, point in magicka, point in stamina. So, every third level will get health or stamina, every other level will get magicka, something like that. So, it looks like... well, I don't remember where I left off last, so let's just start with magicka. And then I think health could use a bump. Back to magicka. And back to stamina. Okay, 4 perks. We gained 4 levels in Forgotten Crevice. I definitely need to level up a little more frequently, I think. Probably could have helped quite a bit having some more skills. Or would have made the Falmer more tough, more difficult. Okay, so let's get to it, shall we? We said for sure illusion. For sure dual casting in illusion. So this is going to cost us more, but it's going to last longer. So we want that. Now, this is one we probably could goose up and max out our mastery level, but not right now. Conjuration, I don't think there's anything I want to do in here quite yet. But if I do, when I do, I'm probably going to go Atromancy and then up to Elemental Potency. So, Atromancy gives us Conjure Daedra and other non-undead minions. Lasts 3 times as long, or 5 times at night. So, but that opens up this, which allows us to conjure Atronachs. And let's see, Atronach conjurations now call potent Atronachs that are higher level and more powerful. We like that. So I don't have any Atronachs at my disposal. I don't have that spell. But when I do, that's going to be awfully nice. Destruction. I do need some destruction spells. But I think more than that, I need heavy armor. We've relied a lot on our armor, our shield, and our sword, along with the Conjured Wraith, along with Ghost Walk. So I think taking a perk in heavy armors is a good idea. Block. We've used block a lot lately. It would behoove us to be able to block a little more damage. No, and one-handed. We have used one-handed quite a bit. And I think it would benefit us to sink a point and max out our one-handed mastery. Now from here, we may go the Disciplined Fighter next. Or we may go... No, we're not going to do that. We won't go Bleed Like a Lamb because that is axes. We need to stick with bladed weapons. That's not going to be it. Light marks doesn't sound like it. What's that? He's not a dual wielder. I don't see that happening. Power attack with one-handed. This is going to be another one. So fighter, furious strength. But that will have to wait. So we took one-handed block armor. And illusion dual casting. So, that is what we have to work with, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward to continue collecting books for Urag. And, boy, I wish I had a few more perks. I always need one more, right? I just had one more. And one more after that. But we'll get there. So, we are currently level 14 already. Thanks to Forgotten Crevice and our challenge with the Falmer. So there we are. And here's our buddy. So, let's do this. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and pose them in the comments, and I will do my best to address them. Until next time, safe travels.